I looked out at the ocean of faces, 60,000 of them, and right as the lights hit the front row, I heard it. A trembling little voice, thin but brave, cutting through the noise like a single violin in a thunderstorm. "Freddie, I'm 8 years old, I brought my own machine. Sing Love of My Life for me?" For a split second I thought I'd imagined it, but there he was, a tiny boy, pale as moonlight, sitting in a wheelchair. Humming Little Box beside him blinked with green lights. It took me a moment to realize it wasn't a toy, it was keeping him alive. His name, I'd later learn, was Oliver Bennett, but in that moment he was just the most courageous soul I'd ever seen. It was Kenworth Park, 1986, our last show. Funny thing about last shows, you never know they're the last until they're already a memory. The sky that evening was heavy, golden and wild. I could feel the ground pulsing under my boots, the crowd chanting our names like thunder rolling in slow motion. And yet amid all that noise, all that glory, it was the quiet hum of that little machine that got stuck in my head. I've faced stadiums, critics, chaos, but nothing prepares you for the sound of hope wrapped in plastic tubes. That boy wasn't asking for attention, he was asking to belong just for one song. And darling, that was all the reason I needed. I later learnt Oliver lived his life by the rhythm of machines. That hum I heard wasn't just noise, it was his heartbeat on loan. His kidneys had failed when he was 6. The doctors told his parents he'd spend most of his childhood plugged into that contraption. But Oliver wasn't one to sulk. He called it Mr. Buzz, said it was his backup drummer. Cheeky little thing, I loved that. He'd discovered Queen during one of his hospital nights, and his nurse told me he used to play Don't Stop Me Now every time they connected him to the tubes. When she asked him why, he said, because it sounds like I still can. You see, that's what most people miss about music. It doesn't just fill silence, it fights it. That boy understood it better than most adults I'd met in the industry. He wasn't looking for sympathy, he wanted rhythm, a pulse he could borrow when his own betrayed him. His mum told me, he'd said once, if I ever see Freddie Mercury, I'll tell him he makes my blood dance. And honestly, I think that might be the greatest compliment I've ever received. That night, watching him from the stage, I could almost hear his little machine syncing with the drums. Like the universe decided to join the band for one song. I met his parents later, but that night I could already feel their courage. His mum, Clara, had that look, half exhaustion, half defiance, the kind of woman who's been told no too many times and decided it's a useless word. And his dad, James, quiet man, hands trembling on the wheelchair handles, but his eyes never left his boy. After the show they told me everything, how they'd written letters for months to concert organizers, hospitals, anyone who'd listen. No one wanted the risk. Too dangerous, they said. Too loud, too unstable, but Clara wouldn't stop. She found a way. Somehow she reached our manager, Jim Beach, who, God bless him, arranged safe access, no press, no attention, just a promise. The boy gets to see the show. They drove 6 hours with that machine in the back seat, stopping every hour to check its power. When they arrived, the medics warned them, one wrong jolt, one unplugged wire, and it could fail. But Oliver had looked at them both and said, if I miss this concert, I'll never forgive you. I told them, well, darling, that's proper rock and roll, ignoring good advice in pursuit of something mad. And we laughed, because that's all you can do when life plays unfair. When I looked at them, I saw the kind of love I'd spent years trying to write about, unconditional, terrifying, and louder than any amplifier. Halfway through the set, I could feel the band in perfect sync. Roger pounding like thunder, Brian's guitar crying out we were unstoppable. But somewhere between Radio Gaga and Crazy Little Thing Called Love, my mind wandered back to that boy. I couldn't stop thinking about him. His little sign had vanished, probably tucked under his chair, but his presence stayed in my head like a chorus that wouldn't end. Every time I looked his way, he was smiling, mouthing the words, tiny shoulders moving to the beat despite the tubes taped to his arms. And then came the pause, the calm, before Love of My Life. I sat down at the piano. The crowd hushed. You could almost hear the breeze moving through the lights. And that's when I saw the sign again held high, this time, shaking. Same words, same courage. So I leaned toward the mic and said, what's that, darling? Let me see you. Someone from the crew handed me the cardboard, and when I read it aloud, the whole field fell silent. I looked right at him and said, "Well, my little warrior, I suppose you've just changed my plans tonight." Brian smiled, Roger nodded, and I knew, without saying another word, what had to happen next. I touched the first piano keys and felt my throat tighten. The lights dimmed, the crowd went quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight. I began softly, "Love of my life, you've hurt me." And I saw him, Oliver, mouthing every syllable. I lowered my mic just enough for him to join in. His voice was small, airy, but it carried. You could hear the crowd start to fade, as if 60,000 people were holding their breath to let this one child sing. Then came the hum of Mr. Buzz between the notes, steady as a metronome. I swear it was like the song borrowed his heartbeat, mine, his, and that machine's all keeping time together. Halfway through he faltered, and I stopped singing for a second. I just smiled and whispered, "Go on, darling, you've got this." He smiled back and sang the next line perfectly off-key. The audience cheered like we'd won a war. When the last chord rang out, I pressed my hand to my chest and said, "You, my dear boy, are the bravest voice I've ever heard." The applause that followed didn't feel like noise. It felt like prayer. After the show, I was still shaking. The others were buzzing about the performance, but I slipped away. When Clara knocked on the dressing room door, I already knew who it was. They wheeled Oliver in, the machine humming softly. I sat cross-legged on the floor beside him. No cameras, no champagne, no spotlight, just two tired performers after a long night. He looked at me and said, "You messed up one note." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my tea. "Well, that's your fault, darling. You distracted me." He grinned. "Good." I asked him if singing ever hurt. He thought for a moment, then said, "Only when it matters." And that line has stayed with me ever since. Before they left, I took off a small silver pendant I'd worn for years, a little crown. I pressed it into his palm. "Keep this," I said. "It's made of stubbornness and glitter, good for emergencies." He laughed again, that sound that could melt stone. And as they rolled away, I remember thinking, I've shared stages with the greatest voices in the world, and somehow, tonight, I was the one learning how to sing. We never planned to film that duet, but someone in the back, a teenager, with an old camera, caught the whole thing. Shaky footage, grainy sound, but it didn't matter. You could hear Oliver's tiny voice, and that was enough. Within a week, radio stations played it. Reporters called it the song that stopped time. Hospitals started showing the clip to children in wards, saying, "Look what bravery sounds like." One nurse wrote to me later, saying, "You could see heart monitors slow down when the song played." Imagine that music literally calming hearts. I didn't care about headlines. What mattered was the echo. That one child's voice traveled further than any stadium anthem I'd ever sung. People told me I gave him something, but I knew better. He gave me something, proof that music isn't about charts or applause. It's about connection, about keeping someone company in their fight. Every time I heard that recording, I'd smile, not because it was perfect, because it was alive. A few weeks later, the phone rang. Clara's voice trembled on the other end. "Freddie, he's gone." I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, listening to the silence after her words. Eventually, I whispered, "He kept his promise, didn't he? He sang till the end." I went to the small memorial, quietly, no cameras, no suits, just a black coat and that same pendant around my neck. When the service ended, I placed it on his coffin for a moment. I said, "Still shining, darling." That night, I went on stage again, same lights, same piano. But before I started Love of My Life, I told the crowd, "This one's for a boy who taught me how to listen." My voice cracked on the last note, and for once, I didn't care. Months later, Clara and James founded a charity. They called it the Little Crown Project, live music for children in hospitals. They asked if I'd support it quietly, no publicity. I said, "Sweetheart, that's the best kind of support." Every few months, I sent donations, handwritten notes, sometimes just a line, for Oliver, who sang with the stars. Soon, tiny speakers started appearing in children's wards. On each was a sticker that said, "Keep the music alive." The first song they played, you already know. Love of My Life became a lullaby for kids who needed a little magic to sleep. And every time someone sang along, I swear you could feel that little hum, again, the rhythm of Mr. Buzz echoing somewhere far away. Years later, I visited a children's hospital. In the hallway, framed behind glass, hung that same cardboard sign. The blue letters were faded, the edges taped and frayed. Underneath, a small plaque read, "He asked for a song. The world listened." Every birthday since, they play Love of My Life through the speakers. The doctors pause, the patients hum. It's never a sad moment, it's gratitude, pure and quiet. I stood there for a long time, listening to the faint buzz of machines, and I could almost hear a tiny voice whispering, "I'm still singing." People often say music saves lives. I don't know if that's true. But I know one boy, one extraordinary, stubborn, brilliant boy who taught me it can change them. So whenever I step on stage, I touch the place where that crown used to hang and whisper, "This one's for you, darling." Because music never dies. It just finds someone new to save.